Turning back now to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. Governor Brian Kemp extending the statewide shelter-in-place order until the end of the month, April 30th. The order was originally set to expire in 4 days on April 13th. But confirmed cases in the state have now surpassed 10,000 with nearly 400 deaths. Fulton and Dougherty County remain the two hardest hit counties, and the U.S. suffering another deadly day with the death toll now at more than 14,000. There were nearly 2,000 deaths between Wednesday and Thursday alone. Our coronavirus coverage continues this morning with Nick Sturdivant, who is live at the state capitol with more on the governor's decision to extend the shelter-in-place order. Good morning, Nick.
Yeah, good morning, Christy. At yesterday's news conference, Governor Kemp basically said this is not the time for Georgians to take their foot off the gas. He believes extending this deadline will help flatten the curve. He also extended the public health state of emergency through May 13th. With this, the governor ordering long-term care facilities and nursing homes across our state to adhere to strict sanitation and antiviral protocols. And he's sending in an additional 1,000 Georgia National Guard members to clean them up. He's also trying to beef up hospital capacity to be ready for the projected peak.
So we see this as an opportunity to be proactive in this area and to ensure that no new cases occur.
Now, when the end is, I think it depends on how people continue to do. If people continue to practice this new norm of social distancing, it'll be sooner rather than later.
And Christy, Governor Kemp also added in that news conference that he believes that most people in our state are complying with this stay-at-home order.
It is the best tool we have to combat the virus right now. Thanks, Nick. New this morning, Atlanta's mayor has issued an executive order to help the city's homeless population amid the pandemic. Nearly $2 million will be used to provide additional shelter across the city. Mara Sirianni is live in Atlanta this morning. Mara, the executive order will now match private philanthropic donations.
Yes, that's the plan as announced by Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom. So as we know, the homeless population in our city is really one of the most vulnerable when it comes to this virus. So Mayor Bottom's signing that executive order and announcing it, she says that it'll allow up to $1.5 million to provide additional shelter options for those who are experiencing homelessness. Bottom says our city is blessed with a number of philanthropic partners who have extended helping hands to meet the needs of our community. So this money is in addition to the existing investment of about $1 million, which is currently being used to help isolate, test, and transport members of the homeless community. Now, in light of the pandemic, we know that some shelters have closed, and it's more difficult for people who are experiencing homelessness to do things like quarantine and social distance. So again, this really is just one more step in fighting this pandemic in our city.
Trying to keep everybody safe. Thanks a lot, Mara. Taking a look at the nation's coronavirus numbers, there are now more than 400,000 cases in the U.S., more than 4,200 deaths in New York State, the epicenter of the outbreak. But Vice President Mike Pence says Philadelphia is emerging as a potential hotspot. Lawmakers will vote today to replenish the fund giving loans to small businesses to pay workers laid off due to the coronavirus. Tracy Potts has the latest on the fight brewing over how that money is handed out.
The Senate votes today to add $250 billion to the Paycheck Protection Program, loans for small businesses to pay workers laid off due to the coronavirus.
We do not have time for the partisan games, and we don't want that, the obstruction or totally unrelated agendas. We want to do this for the small businesses and the workers.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the PPP is where the lights are already flashing red because it's running out of money. Billions have been requested, but very little paid.
Lenders fear they'll be left holding the bag if the loan isn't processed properly or if it turns out to be fraudulent.
That's left many of the nation's 30 million small business owners waiting.
It's emotionally draining, it's mentally and physically draining, and I pray a lot. But that's about all I can do.
Some banks are requiring pre-existing relationships to hand out the loans. Democrats want a quarter of the new money set aside for small businesses that don't have that.
We cannot solidify the inequality to access to capital that exists in our economy at a time when we are addressing the coronavirus.
The loans and early down payment on a second stimulus that both sides say they want to lessen the blow COVID-19 is having on the economy. And President Trump is blaming the World Health Organization for not predicting the virus sooner. The agency's director calls that a personal attack. Now, the Trump administration wants to look at who knew what when, and the budget office is coming up with a plan to cut their funding. Tracy Potts, NBC News.
In an effort to reopen the country sooner rather than later, the Trump administration is hoping to get more essential workers back to work. The federal government loosening guidelines for those exposed to the coronavirus, but only if they do not show symptoms. Liza Lucas joining us live from her home in Fulton County. Liza, what are some of the rules now in place?
Well, we want to be very, very clear what the CDC is talking about here. And they're talking about essential employees being those that are healthcare workers or those that are in the food supply that have been exposed to a confirmed or suspected case of the virus but are asymptomatic. So having said all that, some of the new guidelines under the CDC include that essential employees should take their temperature before their shift, monitor for symptoms, wear face masks, and practice social distancing at work. They're also advised not to congregate in crowded break rooms. Now, employers, on the other hand, are asked to also take some steps like screening employees for symptoms before they return to the job, aggressively cleaning work surfaces, and then sending workers home if they get sick. Now, the CDC director has reiterated this information on social media, on his Twitter feed, again, referring to these employees as critical employees. And what does the reaction look like this morning? A lot of you have been weighing in. Misty making the point that most of them are going to be exposed. She's talking about the likelihood of exposure for some of these professions that we're talking about in terms of nurses or doctors. So she seems okay with this particular decision coming down from the CDC and the White House. Others echoing that statement. But some, like Kathy, feel like this is not a wise decision. And then, of course, where again do all of these masks come from? That, of course, being the recurring conversation we're continuing to follow this morning. We'd love to loop you in. Let us know what you think about these new guidelines. You can use that hashtag MorningRushATL. And in the meantime, Chesley, over to you.